No Isaiah Thomas, no problem for the Celtics last night. As they took down the Cavs in Game 3, Thomas was out with a hip injury he suffered in Game 2. And with the Celtics having the #1 pick and a couple of excellent guards ready to be drafted, they could be ready to move on from him. Max, do you think that the Isaiah Thomas era is over in Boston?
It might be. And I've talked to people who said in the middle of this year, now, Stephen A., I know you said that they were referring to the previous season, but I've heard that they have an open mind about it going forward, that they're not sure that they give Isaiah the max extension. His contract's going to come up before too long. And they don't know that they build around him because he's such a small guard that they give up a lot defensively. And they have to put certain lineups out there with him. They have to compensate for that. And it may be easier to build around a more regular-sized point guard. So it's possible. Now, Isaiah Thomas maybe has supplanted Russell Westbrook as my personal favorite NBA player to watch. The old expression, Stephen A., it's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And by the way, kids, way before Michael Vick got into all that trouble and raised awareness about that whole subject, that really was an expression. That applies to Isaiah Thomas, and then some. There's never been a player in the NBA, Stephen A., where the basket is elevated to the extent that it is, so it rewards height, of Isaiah Thomas's height that's been in the conversation for MVP, for the best player that year. It's just remarkable. He has such heart. I love him. Maybe he's my favorite player. I don't know who I root for over him, and yet I could understand if the Celtics wanted to move on. Marcus Smart, a much larger guard. I don't know that they're sold on him, but a good defensive player, a guy who, when his shot is falling, makes that a whole different kind of team. Well, maybe they go out and look for a Marcus Smart whose shot falls more regularly. They have a ton of draft picks. They have young players like Smart, like Brown, who were high draft picks. They have the Nets pick next year, not only the top overall pick this year, the Nets going to have an excellent pick next year. They have plenty of stuff to get a deal done. And Stephen A., Isaiah Thomas makes $7 million a year. And there are plenty of stupid teams, by the way, like the New York Knicks and Kristaps Porzingis, who have really valuable stuff, who may be just stupid enough to trade it. So if you're the Celtics, you have to be considering it. And so the answer might be yes.
Well, I'm certainly not trying to give the impression that the Boston Celtics are not going to consider a potential blockbuster deal if it's available to them. But what you have to consider, Max, is that Isaiah Thomas is making $6.5 million this season. Next year, he's scheduled to make $6.2 million. You re-up him and give him something tantamount to max dollars where you can trade and get equitable compensation in return for his services. That's a different argument altogether. But based on what he's giving you, league MVP candidate, averaging 29 a game, leading you to the #1 seed within the Eastern Conference, his value has accelerated exponentially. And as a result, because of the dollars itself, unless you're getting somebody to take Al Horford, for example, if you try to package him with an Isaiah, something along those lines, you're not going to be able to get equitable compensation at this particular moment in time for Isaiah Thomas. You will have gotten that last summer, which is why Danny Ainge was entertaining that. Certainly when you look at the squad and the fact that they're better defensively without him, you take those things into consideration. But the reason why I've consistently been told that that was something that wasn't going to happen is because his stock elevated so significantly that you can't get equitable compensation for what he brought to the table for you. So you first got to make a move in free agency. You got to make sure you get a marquee dude like a Gordon Hayward or a Paul George. Obviously, you're going to have the #1 overall pick. So whether it's Fultz, Josh Jackson, or somebody else, you've got to make sure that you have the pieces in place that you want in the event that he departs, so you can justify moving him. And then you got to make sure you get equitable compensation. In the end, what it comes down to is this with Isaiah Thomas and the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics reminded us last night what a defensive liability he is on the court. And as a result, because of it, you have to take all things into consideration moving forward, because you need to have guys on the court that can defend. But primarily, Max, you have to make sure you have reliable shooters on the floor, because regardless of what we saw last night, what we've seen throughout this season is the fact that when Isaiah Thomas is not on the floor, they have trouble scoring. They don't have trouble stopping people, but they have trouble scoring. They need a scorer in the event that he's gone. But more importantly, or just as important, they need a shot blocker on your front line because you have none of those. So those are two key ingredients that they need significant help in before they even consider moving Isaiah Thomas.
Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the salaries. You have to match up the salaries, and so how do you do that when he's only making $7 million? But what I would say is
6'2",
you have to target a team 6.2, right? It was the average annual was 6.75 when he signed the deal. So they have it, de-escalating for some reason throughout the contract now at this point for whatever the cap reasons are. But the point is that actually makes him a more valuable trading commodity, at least from the Celtics' point of view, because they can only take back so much money. That means you're going to be dealing with not only a team that would give up draft picks, but maybe a young player who's not making that much money yet. And it sounds ridiculous to say Kristaps Porzingis and the Knicks, but that's how stupid the Knicks franchise is. You have to target the dumb franchises with young, excellent players and see if they'll give it to you.
I don't even believe that even the Knicks are that stupid because, again, because of his 5'9" miniature frame and the popularity of Kristaps Porzingis and the box office attraction that he is for folks at Madison Square Garden, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And then you also got to take into consideration, Max, you can't sit up there and say it'll be easier for Danny Ainge to let go of a 29-point-per-game scorer. If that wasn't the case, you're right, but that is the case.